Hey guys, what's up? It's Kevin for the win, and we're back for another edition of Diablo 3. Today on the channel, we are taking a look at what was considered the S-tier armor set for the Demon Hunter, that being the Gears of Dreadlands set. Gears of Dreadland recently kind of got a nerf, but here it is. We're going to bring up the skills. 2-piece bonus, gain 4 seconds of momentum when attacking with a primary skill at a maximum duration of 20 seconds. Your primary skills deal 10% increased damage per second of momentum. 4-piece bonus, strafing against enemies will automatically shoot your last used primary skill, and it will also give you for 5 seconds basically a buff. Then the 6-piece bonus basically just buffs strafe a little bit more. So we are using as well the Hunter's Wrath Belt. Your primary skills attack for an increased amount of damage. We're also using Dawn and Valhalla's Request. That way we can power off our Strength and Vengeance as well. Wraps of Clarity. Your Hatred Generators get an increase of 50% damage. We're also going to be using the Restraint and Focus Rings. That way we can deal out more damage with our primary resources, which is God's Hungering Arrow, basically. Okay, so as you can see here, these are the primary skills. Hungering Arrow, Devouring Arrow. Fan of Knives, Bladed Armor is what you want to use here. Shadow Power, Gloom. We're not going to be using this too often in this build. Wolf Companion for the Companion ability. Devices, we're going to be using Vengeance, Dark Heart. That way we take less damage. This is where all our damage is going to be coming from. Strafe, Drifting Shadow. For the passives, you want Numbing Traps. Call of the Weak. We also want Archery, because we're using two-handed crossbows, and Ambush. Now, in the Knives Cube, we want the Knife, Siri Satchel, Depth Diggers, and Conventional Elements. Now, the Knife Siri Satchel is actually what got nerfed in the recent Diablo 3 patch. It used to be that Hungering Arrow pierced a lot more. They reduced it to only being able to pierce 4 times. So, as you're casting Strafe, it will only be able to pierce a maximum of 4 times. What this basically does is it will significantly decrease the speed in which this armor is able to perform at, and it will basically cut down about 30 seconds in terms of clear times as to what you would normally be doing on a Greater Rift. Now, because of that, people have said that Hungering Arrow has been significantly nerfed. No, it hasn't been significantly nerfed. They nerfed the offhand weapon. Gears of Dreadland is still an S-tier armor set. I'm going to show you Greater Rift 60 through 85 to show you the clear times, to show you how, although impactful that change to the offhand weapon was, it's not going to be significant. The only difference here is that you're going to be relying more so on casting your Hungering Arrow outside of Strafe to be able to one-shot certain things depending on the level of your Greater Rift. Now, when you get into the Greater Rift, like always, the first thing you want to do is cast a Hungering Arrow, then start strafing around. What you're going to notice, I'm hopefully going to be able to bring it up on the screen here, is that you see things shooting out every so often. Those are your Hungering Arrows. Now, it used to be that Hungering Arrow would shoot out multiple amounts of times. It would be like somewhere between 6 to 8. Sometimes I've seen 10 Hungering Arrows come out. Now you only get about 4. So because you only get 4, it's hitting in basically less directions, and it's hitting at a less fast rate. So because of that, it takes a little bit longer to kill certain enemies. The more tanky mobs, the elite packs will take a little bit longer to kill. Other things that you're going to notice is certain damage output is not as significant as it used to be. Case in point, when I was using Hungering Arrow on the set in pre-season 23, we'd be hitting for billions of damage sometimes on the regular mobs. Now, as you can see, on average with our critical hits pretty much maxed out here, we are doing on average between 60 million to about 500 million damage based on the amount of times Hungering Arrows piercing. Every once in a while, we might get up into the billions range. That depends if we are using our Vengeance, and because Vengeance does make us faster, as well as gives us damage reduction. But basically, what happened here is they reduced the power of your Hungering Arrow. The reason why Blizzard decided to do that for the Gears of Dreadlands was that the fact that Gears of Dreadland, in general, has been overperforming. Now, before Season 23 went live, there was the PTB, which is the public test build. And on the public test build, they had tested out various different changes to Gears of Dreadland to see what they could do to kind of fix the fact that this was the end-all to be-all armors that everybody was using. They tried a lot of different things out, and at the end of the day, they kind of figured that there was nothing wrong with the armor in particular or any of the skills. The problem was Hungering Arrow in particular, based on the offhand that's always put in Kanai's Cube, so they just decided for maximum of 4 piercing arrows for Hungering Arrow, and that works in conjunction with the strafe ability on this particular armor set, which usually would say when you strafe whatever your last primary resource, which is Hungering Arrow, would be casted. So because Hungering Arrow would cast and you're strafing around, originally you would strafe around and just shoot a whole bunch of things and pierce a whole bunch of things. And now that's limited to about 4 per basically rotation of strafe, I would say. So basically what you're going to see here is a clear time that is going to be less than what normally. Okay, so it's a 2 minute and 48 second clear time on Greater Rift 60. Now, most people are going to look at this and be like, wow, this is super fast. This is great. Nothing has been changed. Well, no, folks. Believe it or not, a Greater Rift 60 with this particular build that I'm using would normally clear a Greater Rift at about 2 minutes, 14 seconds to anywhere between a minute and 59 seconds. What basically has happened is because Hungering Arrow no longer in strafe pierces more than 4 times, you're doing significantly less damage, which significantly decreases the speed in which you can clear things. I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying that it's been reduced in the amount of time that it takes to clear things, and you're doing significantly less damage than what you've been able to do before. Was this a necessary nerf? Yes. Because on the leaderboard for Season 22 of Diablo, and even on the leaderboard for Season 21 of Diablo, the top of the list was Gears of Dreadland. That was what everybody was using. It was doing too much damage. It was clearing Greater Rifts at 150 ranges. People were soloing on 150 Greater Rifts with general ease, and it was so easy that anybody could basically do it. Now the fact that Hungering Arrow doesn't pierce as much also means you have to actually kind of micromanage your resources, because if you strafe around too much and you're not doing your windows correctly, you will, believe it or not, waste your resources, case in point here, and then you will be in one of those situations where you're going to have to cast Vengeance, case in point I'm going to do it here in a minute, and just fire off regular Hungering Arrows without strafing around to build back that resource, case in point there. Before the nerf, you really didn't have to worry so much about wasting your Vengeance, or hatred, I should say, when you're strafing around, because usually the amount of piercings that you would do from Hungering Arrow would kind of mitigate the amount of hatred that you were burning through. That is no longer the case, obviously, because of the nerf. So, what are ways you can use this armor still? Well, you could take out Hungering Arrow in general. I definitely don't recommend it. I think this is still probably the best way to particularly operate this armor, but Blizzard does want you guys to experiment with different skills while strafing around. I don't really see too many air ones that are going to do as effective with this particular armor set, because the rest of the Demon Hunter skills, like, let's say, Evasive Fire, is not really going to work too well. But there are things you could do. You could probably play around with this Evasive Fire build. I would still recommend using Hungering Arrow, as this still performs generally well. Its only difference is about 30 seconds on lower Greater Rifts. Now, for optimization with this armor, if you're still very intent on using this as opposed to the starter set for Season 23, which is the Unhallowed Essence, which is a multi-shot build, which I think actually performs a little bit better, ironically, than Gears of Dreadlands now. What you want to do to optimize this armor, especially now after the nerfs have come down, first things first, on your helm, you want crit hit chance of 6.0% or crit hit chance of 8.0%. It depends basically on the roll for the armor that you get. If it's an Ancient Legendary, you have a higher chance. So it all depends there. On your gloves, my recommendation, as always, is crit hit chance of 8.0% if you're using Ancient Legendary. 6.0 is fine if you're not. Although it's always better to get ancient legendary pieces because those are the only things you could use to augment armors. I would recommend those 6.0 crit hit chance to 8.0 depending on what rare status of the particular gloves you have. I also recommend attack speed 6.0 or 7.0. 8.0 would be the most optimal because that means you're doing more damage because you're attacking faster. And then I also recommend on the gloves, I know this is hard in RNG to get all three of these stats, but I would recommend crit hit damage 50%. If you have those three stats on your gloves, you're going to see a significant increase in the amount of damage output that you're already doing. Now, in terms of other things that you could do for optimization, anywhere that has Hungering Arrow, especially now that it's been significantly decreased based on the nerf to the offhand, I would recommend anywhere where you can get 15% on Hungering Arrow, definitely do so. Anywhere where you can get 15% on your Strafe, definitely do so. Something you could do subsequently, because there is room on this build for it. However, I don't necessarily recommend it because you're going to be doing less damage with your primary resources. And keep in mind, strafing around does cast Hungering Arrow, which is a primary resource, so you will be taking away from that particular aspect. If you wanted to play around, this was a Grey Rift clear of 3 minutes and 22 seconds. Usually on a Grey Rift 65 pre-nerf, that would be probably another 2-minute clear time. It also depended on the dungeon layout as well. This is going to be a Greater Rift 70. You're going to kind of see that not much has changed, although it does take significantly longer to take down some of the tankier elite packs. But getting back to what I was saying, though, before, you could run Captain Crimson set on here. You could get rid of the belt, and you could get rid of pants, and then you could just invest on cooldown. My concern with that is that anything you do on this set to take away from doing damage where your primary resources affects your ability to strafe around and do the most damage while you're strafing around. However, you could play around with this at your own leisure. You could put in the belt and pants for Captain Crimson and then add cooldown wherever you can find it. And based on the amount of cooldown you have will mean you do more damage and you take less damage. That's one way you could kind of modify this to try to get more mileage out of it now that certain things have been nerfed. I have not experimented with that particular build as of yet. Reason for that is I wanted to show people how this armor performs now as it was before in Season 22, as opposed to like experimenting with new things first. So I want to show you kind of like the difference. Really, the difference is going to come down to about 30 seconds until you get very high up in Grey Rifts. Then you're going to see probably about maybe a minute difference in your clear times. Unhallowed Essence is a very good Demon Hunter build, which is your starter set armor for the season. You could, in theory, rock that armor, and that armor will perform just as well as this one. In fact, maybe even slightly better based on the fact that you could just stand back and fire off multi-shot after multi-shot after multi-shot and just rain tons of arrows at everything and pretty much take everything out in sight without having to really go too far. The only problem with that is that Unhallowed Essence, and I do have a build of this available in the playlist. This is one of the first videos I did for Season 23 of Diablo. The only difference really with Unhallowed Essence is that your clear times are going to be a little less fast based on the fact that you have to stand farther away. Unhallowed Essence is not as fast of a build. Some people would consider it more like a push build. Push builds are perfectly good at leaderboards when you invest enough time on your augmentations of your armor and also augmenting your gems. So it is a very viable option. Might be the better option. I will have to put these two side by side again in a future video to definitely tell you which one I think is the definitive Demon Hunter armor to rock for Season 23. But right now we're just testing everything, experimenting. Ironically, this is still a very fast Greater Rift clear. Again, this is not really hard to use. This armor really is about, once you get into a Grey Rift, cast a Hungering Arrow, then start strafing around. When you see that you're taking too many hits, cast your Vengeance so that you can take less damage. Case in point here, you just fire regular Hungering Arrows to deal with Rift Guardians. Because of the way we have this armor set up, you are not having to worry about doing strafe damage. Hungering Arrows by themselves will pretty much one-shot Rift Guardians on the lowest levels. This was a Greater Rift 70, guys, and I shot one Hungering Arrow and it killed the Rift Guardian with one Hungering Arrow in one shot. For legendary gems on this, you want to use Teguk, Bane of the Stricken, and I would recommend Simplicity Strength. Simplicity Strength, you need it for when you're just firing regular hungering arrows, because that says your primary resources do more damage. Keep in mind, this is all basically a primary resource build hidden under the guy stat. You do most of your damage while strafing around because it automatically casts your primary resources. That's basically how the armor works. Okay, so this is a Greater Rift 75. Yes, this is 75 Greater Rift. I'm also going to do a Greater Rift 80 and an 85. The reason I'm doing this is because most people usually complain that I don't do high enough Greater Rift, so I'm showing these demonstrations. The other thing is I want to show you from Tournament 13 going all the way to Tournament 16 and even further how much damage this is still doing out after the nerfs and if it's still viable. Now, if you follow the whole video, you see that you're pretty much achieving anywhere between 2 to 3 minute clear times between Greater Rift 60 through 70. When you get to Greater Rift 75 and up, this is when the armor kind of starts to drop off, and you're going to see that things that used to take you 3 minutes to clear, things that used to take you 4 minutes to clear, start taking longer. It's going to start taking you a minute longer, maybe, depending if you're following this exact build. Now, this is also based on whether you have your armor fully optimized, which, case in point, in this particular armor set, I don't have every piece Ancient Legendary, therefore those pieces are not augmented with Legendary Gem. Now, if you want to push this armor further, you have to Ancient Legendary pieces, you have to get all of them, and then you have to augment them. And my recommendation is always, when you're augmenting, particularly for your S tier builds, you want to augment the gems at level 80 or higher. If you're doing Seasonal Journey, that's a little harder to do because you don't have the luxury of Paragon points to be able to do more damage that way. So, if you're doing your Seasonal Journey and this is the armor you decide that you're going to rock for your Demon Hunter as opposed to a Curse Visage because you just prefer a little bit more speed over push, my recommendation for you guys would be probably augment your Ancient Legendaries at like level 50 to start with. You can always overwrite whatever augmentation you've done on an armor as you get higher up on the levels and get better gems. So you can always overwrite something. So it's not like if you augment on an armor that it's always etched in stone that that's the only thing you can augment into. No, you can go back and improve it and do better. The only problem is you kind of waste the legendary gem. But if you're doing seasonal, chances are you're going to have to augment at an earlier stage of your journey and at an earlier Greater Rift because you're just not seeing the amount of damage output that you would necessarily be seeing if you were doing a non-seasonal character. So that's kind of the only thing. If you're playing non-seasonal, wait to augment your Ancient Legendary Gems at level 80 at the very least. If you can get them to level 100 and then augment them, that's probably the most optimal way to particularly do things. Now, in terms of current leaderboards for Diablo III Season 23, it's pretty interesting what people are using. Firebird, which I did cover on the very first day of Season 23 of Diablo, is the mirror image build. Firebird has been doing pretty well on leaderboard placement. Right now, what's kind of being the end-all to be-all is Whirlwind Barbarian. Why? I have this as a video in the playlist as well that you can check out. Just look for Diablo 3 playlist. Whirlwind Barbarian is probably one of the easiest and best builds for a seasonal character for Season 23. Whirlwind Barbarian is just really good. It's the spin-to-win variant of the Barbarian class. Basically what you see Gears of Dreadlands do, the Barbarian does better, ironically, with Wrath of the Waste for this particular season. And you get it very early into your season because it is a seasonal journey. I was looking at the leaderboards, and pretty much everything is being dominated right now currently by Whirlwind Barbarian. It just seems that people prefer to go the easy route. It's kind of why Gears of Dreadlands did so well in Season 22 and Season 21 of Diablo, because of the fact that they just performed too well. Now, personal opinions about this particular armor nerf, I think it needed to be done. One of the things that was particularly bothersome about Gears of Dreadlands was that it's Once you have all the skills, and if you were to just follow it on paper, it's so easy an idiot can play it. And I don't mean that people who play it as brainless. It's such a foolproof armor. You cast a Hungering Arrow, and then you hold in the strafe button, and you go from start gate to end gate, and you don't really stop doing that until you get to a Rift Guardian, and then you just fire like one Hungering Arrow and you kill things. It's very easy. That's why it dominated leaderboard position. It's very easy and was very powerful, and non-optimized, you just did an insane amount of damage, which is why Blizzard had to nerf it, because there is such a thing as a metagame when it comes to Diablo III particular season, and Blizzard in particular, what they like to do is, let's see what's the clear time before I get into that thought, though, shall we? Greater of 75, clear minute of 4 minutes. So, like I said before, it's a 30-minute second difference because of the nerf. It used to be that on a greater of 75, I would be able to clear it between 3 to 2 minutes. So, as you see, being able to pierce less because of the offhand only piercing up to a maximum 4 times does affect the amount of damage that you do, which in turn does affect the level of speed that you're able to clear a greater with in terms of Gears of Dreadlands. So, yes, this nerf is kind of significant in one retrospect, and then in another retrospect, it doesn't necessarily hurt the armor unless you were trying to use it to get the maximum leaderboard placement with general ease without having to invest a lot more time into your optimization. Now, in terms of leaderboard position, Whirlwind Barbarian is dominating. I have seen some Gears of Dreadlands doing significantly well, but it's seeing a little bit less play because Hungering Arrow is nerfed. Mundugu, which is the Witch Doctor Spirit Barrage stat, has gotten some nerfs as well to its offhand. I'm going to be covering that on Wednesday's video of next week. So I'm going to show you how well that particular armor is faring with the changes to it. That's doing okay on the leaderboard. Right now, everything has been gravitating towards, at least in terms of seasonal characters that haven't like swapped out their armors, Whirlwind Barbarian or Cursed Visage. And then after that, I've seen some Talraja actually surprisingly getting a little bit of love. And then pretty much as you expect, Raymond of a Thousand Storms is not doing as high. Helltooth Zombie Bears, which is the video that we put out on Wednesday, has not necessarily been doing too well, although it's seen some usage. So it seems like right now Season 23 is going to be dominated by the Barbarian. It's going to be the Barbarian season for those of you who just kind of like to prefer to get your seasonal rewards really easy. So that's kind of the trend that I'm seeing. I am seeing a lot more usage in Firebird, which I'm kind of happy to see on leaderboard placement, because Firebird was one of the armors that Blizzard worked really hard on, just giving it and breathing new life into it, and people are starting to play around a lot with the mirror image build, which is available in the playlist. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely check that one out as well if you're looking to play something a little bit different with your wizard. So that's particularly what... usually what we're going to probably see in terms of trends for Season 23 of Diablo is Whirlwind Barbarian is going to probably be the high tier. Bombardment Crusader, Valor Crusader is going to do very well. Gears of Dreadlands still, as you see here, although significantly decreased in the time that it takes to clear a greater rift, hasn't been hindered so much, so that's still going to see some leaderboard placement. Chanteau Mir is still going to do extremely well because that's still the same, and it's way better than any of our options in terms of just speed. Firebird is going to see play. I think we're going to probably, by the end of the season, say that Firebird is an A-tier armor now. I don't think... then A-tier is kind of a stretch. I think it's still personally B-tier, which is way better than the F-tier way it was, thanks to the reworks. But I think that's kind of what's going to happen in terms of placement. This is going to be a Barbarian-centric season, which means not a lot of people are going to be playing together. That was a greater rift 80, 2 minutes and 39-second clear time. That was greatly dependent on the fact that I got a very good dungeon layout, and then on top of the dungeon layout, there were a lot of elite packs, so I was able to kind of elite pack hunt. This is going to be a greater rift 85. This is the last greater rift that we are going to do for the day, so I can show you roughly how this armor still performs yet again. Same strategy as always. Once you get into the Greater Rift, the first thing you want to do is cast a Hungering Arrow, then start strafing around. As you strafe around, Hungering Arrow is going to cast naturally. It is will not be able to pierce more than 4 times based on the nerf. So you will be doing significantly less damage, which will be a bit bothersome when it comes to trying to clear out Greater Rift 85 super fast. One of the strategies that you're going to have to rely a little bit more on, in particular because we're higher up in the grid, is you're going to have to make sure you cast your Vengeance a lot more, make sure you cast your Wolf Companion a lot more so you can maximize the amount of damage that you're doing with this set. When you see there's no enemies on screen for a long time, don't continue to strafe around because you are going to burn through your hatred way too quick. Here's a case point. We went to the gate and pretty much one Hungering Arrow, and then we start strafing around. I cast Vengeance because now that we're in Greater Rift 85, mobs will hit us very hard, and the Demon Hunter class is naturally a squishy class, kind of like the Necromancer, so if I stand still for too long, I will get squashed. Now, as you can see here with this particular demonstration, you notice it's taking a significantly longer time to just kill the lower level mobs that are not even elite packs. This is because, again, the offhand, Hungering Arrow is pretty much caps out at piercing at 4 times. So because I only get 4 Hungering Arrows per that rotation of strafing around, I'm basically casting it in roughly about 2 to 3 less directions than I normally would, and it is piercing significantly less targets. And because obviously Beta Stricken says the more times you hit a particular target, the more times you will do increased amount of damage to it, that significantly hinders particularly certain elements of this build, which is kind of why, I mean, the nerf kind of hurts and kind of doesn't, guys. It really, if you're one of those people that plays Diablo 3 and you never go past, like, Greater Rift 70, and you don't, like, completely clear out your seasonal journey, you're probably not going to notice, really, the changes, because those changes don't really start happening until you're after, you get to way after Torment 16, and you're way, way high up in the Greater Rift. Now, you can fix this. Simply just augment your armors. Would I necessarily ditch Hungering Arrow on this set to use a different primary skill? No. Again, when you look at the primary resource generators that you have to use for the Demon Hunter, you have Evasive Fire, which is not necessarily bad, but if I were strafing around, I don't think I would want to do Evasive Fire. You have Entangling Shot. Entangling Shot is not a very good ability to use, and strafing around casting Entangling Shots and having to use the Odyssey's End to get more damage out of it would not really be a good primary resource skill. So when you're looking at all these things, Hungering Arrow still works way better than any of those other primary resource attacks that you would normally use, despite the fact that it's been significantly weakened. It's still going to do much better. Maybe you could get away with channeling Evasive Fire while strafing around, particularly using the rune where you're not doing particular things where you could just kind of stay and do more damage, but I don't know, guys. Okay, so case in point, I got squashed there because my Hungering Arrow was not piercing as much while I was strafing. Again, that has to do with the offhander. Still, regardless, we did take out that Rift Guardian significantly well. I'm going to identify these things in case I did get a Primal Ancient Legendary, and I don't think I did. Okay, so again, with the gems that we're using for this armor build, and I will have a link to the armor set build in the description for you, for those who need to see things on paper and a paper breakdown. It is Bane of the Trap. Zay's Stone of Vengeance is not on this, so it's Bane of the Trap, Simplicity, Strength, and Taeguk. Those are the gems you want to run on here. Definitely make sure you run them. That's how you can get the maximum amount of damage out of this particular build. Let's see what the clear time was. Alright, so although I'm complaining, this is a clear time of 3 minutes and 53 seconds. The only difference here is before the nerf to this particular offhand weapon, you would probably be able to clear this Greater Rift at 2 minutes, and then a Greater Rift 90 would probably be a 3-minute clear time, and then a 95 would probably be the 4-minute clear time. So you see you kind of went up about a minute in your clear time based on the fact you're doing less damage, which basically is how this is going to impact this particular armor. It's not that significant. It's only going to play a role in your seasonal journey if you are trying to have your name at the top of the list of the leaderboard placement or you want to be in the top 50. Most people are going to play their season. If you're a casual player, this nerf is not going to impact you whatsoever. This is only really going to impact speedrunners, which is basically what I'm getting at. So it's not a major nerf. This is not the end-all to be-all nerfs that the internet has been making it out to be. This does not mean Gears of Dreadlands is a terrible armor. It does not suck. This is still going to be the best and most optimal way to run Gears of Dreadland for the time being, unless our abilities get buffed in future seasons. So that's going to do it for today's video. Make sure you give us a like and subscribe, and I will see you for the next Diablo 3 video.